Good morning, everybody. Welcome. We're about to get started. There's coffee and pastries in the kitchen if you're interested. So let's turn our attention. Welcome, Dr. Cox. Glad you're back.
I'm always glad when y'all come back. I always imagine getting here on Saturday morning to a conference. It's like just, nobody came back. Anybody here a bow hunter? Like a deer bow hunter? Okay. If you were, I was going to dismiss you. Because I'm thinking, okay, if you're a bow hunter and you're here when it's 58 degrees outside and perfect weather and bow hunting season, and you care enough about your marriage to be here, honey, kiss him on the cheek. He passes. He gets to clap out. He's obviously the best husband in the room. But anyway, apparently the bow hunters are out bow hunting. So, sorry, ladies. But I applaud all of y'all like I did last night. I'm covetous for my Saturday mornings like my Friday nights. I want to be making, pancakes in my jammies right now. So again, blessings to you. I applaud you for wanting to commit to your marriage like this. Maybe you see after last night what I meant when I said this was kind of a different kind of marriage conference. I'm pushing you. I like to talk to regular old people in the pews with what I know as a psychologist. I don't like dumbing it down. And I want you to think about your marriage the way I do in my office. I work with bad marriages all the time, including my own. And this is how I do it. And I want you to know how it goes. And church leaders are always going, what can we be doing to help marriages? Well, a lot of the problem is that in our culture, people don't take seriously enough how complex and difficult it is to be married well. There's a lot going on, and I want you to know what's going on, okay? And you singles, you're going to meet Mr. and Miss Wonderful, and, not to be Johnny Raincloud or anything, but then it gets hard, okay? So I'm wanting to teach you sort of how hard works, but I am pushing you, and I recognize that. One of my favorite stories is about an old man in my church named Mr. Lemon, and he had a long white beard. We called him Moses. And as long as I've been alive, he was old. He was old as Alabama. I mean, this guy was old, and he would hobble through the church. But anyway, we had a men's prayer breakfast years back, and we had a marriage expert come and speak to us one morning on marriage, and he was very brilliant and theoretical and taught us for a solid hour on the dynamics and meta dynamics of the matrix of the subdimensional marital dyad. And we're all just like, this. And then he closes in prayer. And in that little silent moment after you say amen before the chairs push back, the room is quiet, Mr. Lemon says, loud enough for everybody to hear it, he goes, I'm just glad I got married before it got so complicated. So imagine maybe you're feeling that, after John's conference. All right, one more Mr. Lemon story. I got a lot of Mr. Lemon stories. Okay, so I've known him my whole life. So I'm walking down the hall as a teenager, and I always loved him. So walking down the hall, and I'm like, hey, Mr. Lemon, what's going on? He's like, John, he said, you been reading your Bible? And I'm like, oh, yeah, Mr. Lemon, been reading my Bible. He goes, you been reading it every day? And I'm like, yes, sir, absolutely, been reading my Bible. He goes, well, we had it in the lost and found at the church here for about 6 months, and what you want to come by and get it? Okay. Okay, so last night we talked about 4 areas that we got to have ticking in our marriages in order to do marriage in real life that feels good. We call them the 4 I's: identity and intimacy and identity and imperfection and impulse control, and mostly that 5th I about being humble and repentant and open to growing and open to seeing, our 50% of our contribution to this gumbo, all right? And our point last night was that, if you struggle in your marriage, it's not because you're a jerk or your spouse is a jerk or just because you're a sinner or you married the wrong person. It's because we're all lacking abilities in the image of God that humans have to make life work. Not just marriage, but life. I mean, how's your job going to go if you never develop the ability to make sense of risking failure? Or how's your obedience to God going to go if you never made sense of managing your impulse or of submission? Okay? So, basically, what we're going to do this morning is look at two of our four abilities, in a sense, intimacy and identity. Okay? We're going to look at intimacy, connection right now, and then we're going to look at the issue of identity. Now, what I mean by that is, if I am me and you are you, guess what's going to happen? We're going to have conflict because we're messed up? No, because we're not the same person, okay? So we're going to have to make sense of how can I be you and you be me? Because if we're exactly the same, one of us is unnecessary. As I alluded last night, these are kind of the two most important things in marriage, in a sense, the dynamic of kind of be close to you, but kind of also still be me. That's kind of a whole nother show. So we're going to look at these this morning. I wish I could unpack them all. Again, my podcast has a lot more. So let's get started on intimacy. I mean, hey, if you're going to be married, you might want to get to know one another. Just call me crazy, right? Now, guys get a lot of stereotypical hassle about not being able to do the intimacy thing real well and the emotional connection thing real well. But remember, me and Norma are reversed, and a lot of y'all are reversed, I imagine. But it is deserved in a lot of sense. A lot of guys, we tend to be kind of, not as tuned in with that whole emotional thing. It's like, ladies, what you're wanting, you're at dinner, and you're like, you look at your husband, and you're like, what are you thinking, like, right now? And you're thinking he's going to say, just, that I have everything I need, right here with you. But what he actually will say is something more like, I was just thinking, pigs are really big. If you think about it, you could ride them. And that's sort of what you're dealing with here. So, you're dealing with a guy who, in Mississippi at least, who's, ultimate expression of emotional endearment might be, spray painting your name on an overpass. That's the way we show our allegiance, So this is difficult sometimes, but it's what marriage is for, okay? Naked and not ashamed, remember? The Bible actually describes Adam and Eve's marriage. It tells us what their marriage was like. It was naked and not ashamed. And when it says that, it's not meaning, the first nudist colony. It's talking about a relational status. It's saying, let me explain to you what their relationship was like. They were able to be fully themselves, fully open and known, and it was loved. There was no shame. When I'm really me, it's welcomed. Try that on a second. Isn't that what we're all looking for? There's no hiding. There's no criticism. Sorry, I lost some pages. Good, we'll just spitball through them. There's no criticism, there's no hiding. You express an idea and it's welcomed. You express a need and it's, engaged. Doesn't that sound good? Anybody interested? We'll pass a sign-up sheet around, all right? And everybody would sign. Because that's what we need, and it's what we were created for. I think it's some of what heaven's like. I talk about it in the book. There's a chapter on heaven. At last, the restoration of that kind of intimacy again. So what we're going to talk about this morning is what God calls abiding, what shrinks call intimacy, what last night we called let you in, keep you in, and we're going to talk about three different things about it. Number one, what intimacy is. I want you to get some grid for thinking about what it is. People talk about intimacy and closeness. What really are we talking about there? I want to talk about some of the dynamics and the little difficulties people get into as they try to make sense of getting close emotionally. And I want to talk about how we can grow there, all right? So, number one, basically, what are we meaning when we talk about intimacy and closeness? I realized one day that, people are always talking about how important communication is and intimacy is. And by the way, I don't care what a couple comes to see me for. Like when a couple comes for therapy, I mean, they could be poisoning each other's soup, but still what they say is, I think what we've got is communication problems. I'm like, well, it seems like you can communicate that you hate each other's guts pretty well, thank you very much. But I mean, it seems like y'all are pretty much connecting. I don't know, people always say that's our problem is communication. Anyway, I was just thinking one day that people are always talking about intimacy. What does that actually mean? All right. Well, first you got to realize with intimacy, one way to make sense of it is to recognize that there's different levels of it. And I want to articulate those levels just to give us some sort of hooks to hang our hats on with that. In other words, emotional connection and intimacy is a relative term, kind of like being rich. All right. So you might say, I'm in Jackson and I'm rich. Okay. That's real different from somebody like North Shore, Chicago saying I'm rich. All right. It's a relative term. So likewise, when one spouse says, I want to really know you, and your other spouse is like, well, you know that I like watching, MSU Bulldogs in my boxers, so, it's good to know you too. Then we got a problem. We're missing something as to, what intimacy really means. So let's just talk some about what intimacy is, what it's not, kind of get us on the same page. I like to name 4 levels of intimacy, kind of concentric circles of it. Number 1, I just call drive-through level, and basically this is just the level of personal intimacy where you say things like, would you like fries with that? Okay. In other words, I'm not really connecting with you at all. This is, I get on the elevator and say, would you push 2 for me? How you doing? Fine. In other words, the only reason I'm interacting with you is because we're kind of occupying nearby space. Now, if this describes the status of your romantic relationship, please see me after class. Okay. But number 2, I alluded to last night, news, sports, and weather. And this is where we chit-chat, okay? Like some of us chit-chatted with news, sports, and weather before we started here. It's like, can you believe we've had no rain? Or, how long do you think, Taylor and Travis will last? Or, I wish I was as cool as Jordan Peterson or Bootsy Collins. I'd take either one. Anyway, news, sports, and weather, basically the chit-chat stuff. And most relationships begin there. That's an appropriate skill to have, right? I mean, we need to be able to be superficial sometimes. I had a friend in California who could never be superficial. And you'd be like, hey, Sally, how's it going? And she'd go, well, I've been having some real depressive ideation and some issues with my family of origin. And you're kind of like, okay, yeah, me too. Good to see you. It's like, anyway, so we got to be able to do news, sports, and weather just, to hang out. But if your relationships stay there, and that's as far as you can go, then you'll be well informed and know all the scoop, and you'll be popular, but frankly superficial, because as we said last night, we haven't gotten to the truth yet. We haven't gotten to your heart yet, And some marriages settle into news, sports, and weather. In other words, all their relationship is kind of the roommate phenomenon. We're going to talk about what happened today and what we did today, and what the latest scandal in town is, and whatever like that. And they've kind of given up. So let's not give up. All right, number 3, TCB. We got any Elvis fans here? No, Elvis fans. That's so sad. Okay, do you know what TCB means? Taking care of business, right. It actually should be TCBB, taking care of business, baby. Right? In other words, Elvis had this entourage, kind of the Memphis Mafia, who took care of all this stuff, and they just kind of go by and go, hey, TCB, Elvis, they're taking care of business. TCB. This is kind of where we live practically with coworkers. This is what I'm doing right now. We solve problems, we give opinions, we think, we resolve. We say things like, I think I need to lose some weight, or we need to stay in our budget, or I need to do something like to resolve this problem. Let me give you my opinion. All right. This is Martha in the Bible, doing and working. This is what, Zach does to get us started. We're getting kind of structure and solving problems. And actually, this is legit. Okay. You got to do practical life, right? We'll talk about that more later on this morning. I mean, if this was a talk on practical life and getting stuff done, not being passive, remember passivity from last night? Then this, we could, close in prayer, We have a talk on handling life. You got to do this. TCB is useful. But if this is all you can do, again, we're going deeper each one. Your life's going to run like a sewing machine. You're going to, solve your problems, do your life. People like you. And granted, this is more intimate than anything so far. This is your opinions. This is your ideas. Okay? But if it's as deep as you can go emotionally, then actually it'll be sadder than that scene where they lock up Dumbo's mother. You know that scene? It'll be really sad, because there'll be a sense in which you'll really be alone emotionally, in which people won't know you. So TCB is functional. You get stuff done. We need you. But people won't really know you. That's not your deepest heart. And this is a talk on intimacy. So marriage needs intimacy. In other words, Adam had meaningful work to do in the garden, right? He was naming animals. First commandment, go subdue the earth. And he was busy, TCBing. And God said, not good. In other words, we got to get some relationship in there. We need more than just the doing, okay? Which takes us to level 4. God calls it abiding, so am I. All right. This is Jedi level, guys, all right? This is basically where you're strong enough, where you're kind of grounded enough inside to give up having to be, got it all together, man, Steve McQueen, or you gals, I don't know, Gwyneth Paltrow, who's got it all together, I don't know, and be the person you are with the person you're with, okay? This has let you in from last night, okay? This is where I actually get to look in someone's eyes and know that they know me, and those eyes know some real garbage about me, but those eyes still love me. That's where this intimacy thing is going, okay? This isn't just about some kumbaya time with their spouse. What we're going to be building here this morning is, what does it look like to live the way God created us to live? He created us to have connection with someone else to thrive. And in order to get that level of connection, we got to have some understanding of this level 4 thing, okay? At this level, I get to see those other eyes, and they know me, and those eyes know garbage about me, but those eyes still love me, okay? Here's another way of saying it. We all have a true self. In other words, kind of a non-chameleon self, really who you are. Chris Rock says, when somebody first meets you, he says, they ain't meeting you, they're meeting your representative. Somebody sent ahead to make you look good, right? Chris Rock is my favorite Reformed theologian, so you'll hear a lot of Chris Rock this morning. Anyway, true self means really who I am when I'm by myself, who John is. What is it like to be John doing a conference? How does it feel, John? Do you like this? What I'm about? What is it like? Basically, this abiding is, like we said, what intimacy was last night, knowing what I feel, sharing what I feel, and caring about what you feel. This is the same kind of thing, okay? Abiding is basically my true self experience of me shared with you, okay? We're not building jet planes, okay? So think about it even superficially. I want you to try this on. I want to kind of take you there. You wake up on Monday morning. You have an experience. You think, it's Monday already? You think, but I have a fun lunch today with that friend. And you go, but that report's due Thursday. God, I haven't even gotten started on that. Do you hear the subjective experience there? That's you, okay? That's your heart. That's you. Everyone shake hands with you, okay? In other words, that's your gut. All right, now TCBers, this is why your spouse wants to talk to you about your day, okay? It's not because they're secretly writing the biography of Dr. John L. Cox, okay? But your experience of what it was like to be you in your day is your heart, okay? It's that level 4 abiding thing, okay? They're wanting to know what it was like to be you today. That would be a connecting thing. They're not wanting to, dig back up every meeting you're trying to forget. They're wanting to know you, okay? That's intimacy. All right, that's easy, superficial, your personal experience. Let me go a little deeper. Abiding intimacy is also more about some of the things about me that are vulnerable, some of the things about me that are more tender, some of the things that are about maybe scared or hurt or meaningful or joyful. Can I share those with you? All right, I'm going to tell y'all a story twice. Actually, I think I have this on my iPad. Hang on. Yeah. You see that? That's a jet sideways. See, the earth is on the left? Anyway, my dad flew, I'm going to tell you the story twice. My dad flew jets in the Air Force in the 50s, and he and I have always flown. And so 2015, I found a guy who had a T-33 jet like my dad flew. And we went out to New Mexico, and we flew the jet. He flew the jet, I flew the jet. And that was a picture from my GoPro of flying it. Anyway, that's cool. I had that right there so you can actually see it. All right, so it was a T-33 jet. New Mexico's probably 3,600 feet, like platform above sea level, mostly high desert, good weather, great flying. All right, TCB, you get my story? Let me tell you my abiding story. My dad has told me stories about this jet his whole life. We built models of it. Some of my first memories were standing up on a Cessna, flying like this, and ultimately he taught me to fly completely. I don't have a license. I'll tell you all why about that if you want one day, but if the fact that I don't have a license is why I'm not dead right now. But anyway, we always flew, and then I found this guy who had this jet, and we went, and we took my mom. You know, she was out there in Big Spring, Texas, when he would fly jets. And we meet the guy out there, and he's spooling up the engine of this jet. My dad climbs in, and I'm standing there watching my dad climb in this jet. Like, I've seen so many pictures of him, 50 years old. He's 82 at the time, by the way. And canopy closes, and I watch him taxi away, and you can smell it, like that kerosene smell. We're on the tarmac. I'm holding my little mom next to me, and watch him all the way down in the runway 27, I remember, and turn around, and you can see the heat bloom before you hear it, and ultimately it's like like that, and I see my dad flying off in his plane. And my mom and I just stood there on the tarmac and cried. So, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, do you feel any difference between those two stories? One is a TCB. You got all the information, right? Abiding is I told you my heart, all right? Now, notice that wasn't some sort of schmoopy, touchy-feely thing. I'm flying a dang jet, baby, okay? I want you to get the vibe that your heart doesn't necessarily have to be about weakness and like sharing your feelings. This is your soul, baby. Okay? This is you being alive in relationship with somebody else. Did I go off? Let me see if I can screen mirror this again. By the way, my dad was doing a 4G loop in the jet and threw out his, did something, one of his cervical whatevers, and went to his doctor. And I said, well, what'd you tell him? And he said, I told him I heard it lifting luggage. I said, you didn't tell him you were 82 years old doing a 4G loop in a jet? And he's like, I don't think he needs to know that. Okay, so anyway, part of this abiding thing is, can I share me? I just shared me with y'all. Y'all have something about my heart that's dear to me. You got that? So, that's all intimacy is. It's nothing spooky and psychological, all right? We're not rolling chicken bones here. I'm just telling you my heart, right? You know John now, more than me just saying, no, turn to page 4 in your handbooks, okay? You feel the difference? Marriage needs story number 2, okay? And if you don't know how to do that, then That's one of the things I'm going to want you to bring to your body of Christ people, and we can talk about learning that. Now, let's talk about feelings for a second, because feelings get a bad name in a lot of places. Like I just alluded, sometimes they get put in the touchy-feely category. Christians can sometimes resist the dynamic of feelings because, they're not that big a deal. I don't know if any of y'all are old enough to remember the old Campus Crusade tracts of fact, faith, and feeling. And it was like a little train, and like the engine was facts, and the coal car was faith, and then like the caboose was feelings. It's like, you don't really need a caboose, do you? Right? So we can kind of see feelings as not that important. And actually, that's legit in a sense. We have a faith that we didn't make up. We have a faith that is real, regardless of how you feel about it. It's factual. I mean, whether I feel like God is real doesn't have anything to do with it. So with fact-based decisions, like is God real, or like I said last night, is that truck going to hit me? How I feel about it really doesn't make that much difference. So that can make us think feelings aren't that important, right? But relationally speaking, okay, this isn't the Council of Chalcedon. This is a marriage conference, all right? Relationally speaking, what you feel is going to be the core of who you are in the relationship. If you and I had an interaction after this meeting about a non-emotional topic, like, should you go bow hunting? Is bow hunting good? What kind of bow do you have? You probably wouldn't remember that conversation very long. But if I hurt your feelings, if I insulted you, then they'd say in a couple of years, we're going to get that John Cox back to do another conference. You're going to go, oh my gosh, you know what he said to me? Like 2 years later, you're still thinking about it. Why? Because I hurt your heart. I hurt your feelings, okay? So to have a relationship in which hearts matter, in which hearts actually thrive, because this kind of connection is actually human fuel. Do you remember those stories like from the war, Second World War, the miasma studies? They had all these orphan babies in hospitals, and some of the wings had higher mortality rates of the babies, and they couldn't figure out why, because the babies were all getting the same formula or whatever they had. But they started researching into it and found out that it was the babies who were failing to thrive were babies who weren't being held. Literally, they needed the human contact to live. It was called miasmus. Now, that's just a glimpse of God created us. When he said it's not good for the man to be alone, it wasn't like a Bible verse. It really meant it, okay? It's really not good for us. Parts of us that are alone are like that plant in the closet that we talked about last night. They get worse, okay? So, if we have a relationship in which hearts matter, how we feel about it, sharing me, but also hearing you, has to be a really fundamental part about that. Norma's mother is very sick. Not sick, so old. It's sort of like the Lord needs to take her home, and it's just a burden, and she's, the story. There's so many stories like that. And so I come home, and Norma's really down, and I said, what's up? She said, another one of Mother's sitters quit. So what's the TCB response to that? Well, they have like agencies and stuff to help like replace people like that, right? I mean, it's not a hard problem to solve. Instead, I thought at this moment, she needs my heart. So I went abiding with her. I said, oh my gosh, this responsibility just never gets easier, does it? This pain, the sorrow, the difficulty with your mother never gets better. It just seems like it goes on. And then you finally get something settled and it blows up again. I know you're exhausted. And she started to cry. Why? I was nice to her. She started crying. She started crying because I heard her. Okay? Because she got understood. She got connected. That is what bonds people together. In fact, here's one of my little favorite sayings. The phenomenon of being heard, and as we'll talk about in the conflict talk, of being gotten, the emotional experience of that is so close to the feeling of being loved that they're almost indistinguishable. When you understand me and I go, yes, you get it. Thank you. That's a rush, emotionally, humanly, that's huge, okay? So I needed to get her first, okay? Now later on, I can come back and say, let's call an agency, okay? We're not throwing out the TCB baby with the bathwater. We do come back and solve problems, but you can't ever engage an emotionally based problem by solving it first. You can solve it second. You TCBers out there, you want to solve things? Cool. We'll talk more about that. We're glad to have you, but do it second, okay? We need to be heard first. We're not abdicating the practical solutions. I just want to give you a category for letting people matter and understanding their hearts. I saw a couple once, and she walked in ahead of him and already was crying when she walked in my office. And she sat down on the couch and she started crying. She said, he just hurt me so bad. He told me I was fat. And he's now walking into the office, and I look up, and he's this guy that's like a total logical, like brainiac engineer guy, okay? I think he had built his own positron collider in his backyard, you know? And he looks at me and he goes, well, she is, isn't she? And I'm kind of like, you know, Spock, I'd say live long and prosper, but you're not, dude, you know? You ain't gonna live long or prosper thinking like that, okay? And he was totally not connected with what it felt like to be a person. Objectivity versus her heart, okay? I had a TCB guy say once his wife had, her boss had retired, so she had, quote, lost her job, and she was really struggling with it. And I said, where are you about how much she's struggling? Like, she's really hurting about this. And he said, well, I don't see it as a bad choice because her boss retired, but I would like to know her plans because I would like to make adequate preparation. And I'm like, this program has performed an illegal operation and will be shut down, you know, like blue screen, you know, whatever. So this is intimacy too, is can I hear you? And what that means is empathy, okay? I'll ask you, could you feel how I felt about flying the jet with my dad? Could you touch that? All right, again, like we did last night. I want you to try this stuff on here. You did it. You could touch what it was like for me. That's empathy. I could try on what that meant to John. Now, part of that is because I really told you what it felt like to be me, so I handed it to you. But how many times does your spouse hand you their heart and we don't hear it? All right? All right, so intimacy, abiding, let you in, bringing who I am, hearing who you are. It's great stuff, right? Intimacy, closeness, belonging, naked, not ashamed. Sounds great, right? But oftentimes, all of us, most of us, get a little squirrely when we start talking about this level of intimacy, this level of disclosure, you know, this level of connection. We're like, no, I'm actually good with date nights and communication skills, man. You got a handout on that, you know? I don't want to go to that deep level stuff. Why do we get uncomfortable here? Why is this hard? I don't want to pretend it's not. We all get scared. I mean, but we were created for it, right? God created us for this kind of connection. Why aren't we all like, wee, here's my heart, you know? Yeah. Well, why? Well, number one, if you ask me, it's vulnerable and scary and open and kind of exposed. I actually asked that guy who said that he wanted to make adequate preparation for his wife's job. I asked him why he didn't connect with what he felt. I said, you're giving this real head answer. Where's your heart in this? And he said, there's no one that I trust enough to where I would bring that level of my heart. I'm like, whoa. For a guy who's shut off emotionally, what an insight. He was basically saying, I on purpose keep that close, all right? In other words, since we're fallen, since we're broken, knowing real me can get kind of sticky and vulnerable and dangerous. I mean, before the fall, the Bible tells us that Adam and Eve were naked and not ashamed. Now, why does it say that so overtly? Because it's weird. That's the point. It's saying, like, get this. When they were naked, they were not ashamed. Are you kidding me? Because, I mean, the rest of us, when we're naked, we're ashamed. I mean, if I show you my heart, you know, I want you to think I'm 10 feet tall, good looking, and bulletproof. I don't want you to, know my heart. Me not feel. Me Conan. Conan not feel. Conan just blow up like a jerk later. Anyway, if you want to get cosmic just for a moment, this is the problem of the human race. BT dubs is what we need most in the universe is the intimacy and connection of really being known and loved. And what we're most terrified of in the universe is the intimacy and connection of being known and really loved. Right? That's why I have a job. Okay. I even tease people that, what's the passage that perfect love casts out all fear, The reason it does is because if you ever really felt perfect love, it would scare you so much that nothing else you're afraid of would be scary at all, okay? Anyway, so first reason marriage and intimacy is hard is because we all fear exposure and shame, okay? And marriage throws our most vulnerable parts out into, am I off? Those are our most vulnerable parts out into the wild. Oh, okay. Thanks, Brandon. Anyway, my wife ends up really knowing me, whether I want her to or not. And I'm kind of not sure I really want her to sometimes, right? Is it misbehaving still? This is one of the reasons that affairs are appealing, by the way. This fear of real intimacy thing. People say, I love Trixie because she understands me. And I'm like, actually, your wife understands you. She knows you're a jerk, okay? You actually love Trixie because she doesn't understand you, because she thinks you're amazing. And as long as y'all can maintain that fantasy, this kind of feels fun, right? All right, now that looks like something's lighting up over here. Here we go. Does that work? We on? Okay. Anyway, where were we? Trixie? Oh, yeah. Okay, so in real relationships, people get hurt. Another reason is sometimes we were just never taught it. In other words, I see a ton of people who just grew up in families in which nobody went below the surface. There wasn't anything emotional. Dad's anger made everybody scatter. Mom's drinking made everybody shut down, whatever. So we never learned the strange category. Norm and I were at a restaurant years ago, and as we were sitting there eating, this family of four comes in. Mom, Dad, Billy, and Sis. They come in. They immediately sit down. They immediately all four pull out books. All right? The 21st century analog of this is cell phones. Anyway, they never look up from their books. They keep reading. The waitress comes. They look at their menus. They hand their menus down. They order. They go back to their books. And they never say a word to each other the whole time. And then their food comes, and they're like reading and eating like this, and they never interact with one another at all the whole time. Norm and I were like spellbound. We're like, are they ever going to acknowledge one another? We're like ordering more desserts and stuff. Like we wanted to see what happened. So I tell Norma, I said, I mean, what are these kids going to be like when they get married one day? Like their spouse is going to go, like, Billy, like, where are you, man? He's going like, page 32. I don't know what you mean. Like they're going to have no category for what it means to be in a relationship, right? Anyway, so a lot of reasons that it's hard, but it's core to us. We're created for it. So, TCB Elvis, what she means when she says she wants you to hear her feelings, or like I said, a lot of abiders are men. What he means, Priscilla, when he says he wants to talk about how hard work was, is that for emotionally awake people, what we feel is kind of the core of who we are. And if you care about relating in a loving way to them, then start learning about how to let feelings matter, see the validity of that world. I hope I'm communicating that. God calls it our heart, all right? Now, I will grant you that feelings and emotions will not always make sense, okay? In other words, one night in the middle of the night, Norma wakes me up, push it at me like that. And I'm like, what? She said, I just had this dream. We were just driving through the desert, and you just drove off and left me there. And I'm like, what do you say to that? I said, well, go back to sleep. I'll come pick you up. I mean, what are we supposed to do? Okay, so feelings aren't going to make sense all the time, right? Though I was talking to this guy who's a real TCBer at the office and saying, quit trying to fix her, just hear her feelings. So he comes down to go to work one morning and she's like, oh, babe, wait. I was just about to take the kids to school and we have a flat tire. Oh, so frustrating. And he says, I can hear your feelings, that you're very frustrated, and I'm with you. I'm going to go to work, though. And anyway, he was teasing. But he said, isn't that what you want, me to hear your feelings? Anyway, so TCBers have a point, all right? Another little by the way here, I think this level of intimacy thing, this whole connection emotionally thing is the primary foundation for sexuality, okay? In other words, in my office, 99% of the people who have dissatisfying sex lives, the issue resides not so much in their sexual life, but in their intimacy relationally. Also the identity piece, we could talk about that. There's a sense in which I don't understand sex therapy. To me, that's kind of like being a fever doctor. That's a symptom of something more heart-based, that basically sexuality should be the physical expression of the emotional connection that we're having. In other words, sexuality is a language. It's a way of communicating connection, belonging, also fun that goes below verbal. That's another show. I'm not going to get too far off in that. But sex is a language. And if you don't have anything really significant to communicate, then sex ain't going to be really very spicy, right? So TCBers, this is why your abiding emotional spouse, man or woman, can be a little confused, look at you like you're crazy if you've been distant all day emotionally, disconnected, and all of a sudden you say, hey, let's get frisky. Right? To them, it's kind of like you've said, I don't like America. I'm taking down the American flag. I disown patriotism. I condemn the United States. But hey, let's have a big 4th of July party tonight. And they're like, wait, what? I thought you hated America. you've been disconnected all day. And like, yeah, I do, but I just like, hot dogs and fireworks. It's like, for them, that's kind of crazy. You want the expression of intimacy without the intimacy, okay? And that feels kooky to them. But, again, I'm not dogging the TCBers here. This is just a talk on intimacy. Sex is also a language of fun, and TCBers get that. So, don't knock it till you try it. All right? Couple of sex jokes. This couple came in and they were talking about that they had decided what they would made. I don't give homework like this, but they had done it. A list of what the things that they wanted in the marriage therapy, and one of them on his list was sex at least once a week with enthusiasm. The guy's been around the block. You can tell. He knows, right? Okay. Another guy said that he was going to ask his wife for tips on how to initiate sex because, after all, she has a 100% success rate. Okay. Anyway. All right, another thing regarding intimacy. Couples in the trenches, we get to this part of the talk, and couples in the trenches, they got kids, all that kind of jazz. They're like saying, yeah, this is great, but, our lives are so crazy, and everything's so busy. We don't really even have, the bandwidth to have intimacy, We're struggling. We got so much going on. How are we supposed to make room for this kind of sharing that you're talking about? A great question, legit question. 2 answers. Number 1, you're right. You are in a difficult time. There is compromise and loss there. I remember seeing this research study when I was in graduate school, and it traced marital satisfaction over the lifespan. And it began with when you're newly married, you're pretty happy in your marriage, okay? And then when you have kids, it kind of starts to go down like this, all right? And then, you live there with kids, and maybe there's a date night here or an anniversary or whatever, but basically you kind of live here, and then your kids leave, and then when you have grandchildren, it's like off the scale again, all right? But basically you're living in the bottom of the U, and in the meantime, there's all this stuff intruding on your marriage. So in a sense, you're correct, all right? I used to teach this at First Pres when I taught Sunday school back there, and we would see, friends dragging kids in from into the church. It's raining and everybody's crying, and we're like, "How y'all?" And they're like, "We're in the bottom of the U." All right, so you are in the bottom of the U. So there's that legitimacy. But number 2, intimacy is not just about date night. All right? Intimacy is not something that you sit down and do necessarily. Intimacy is simply that a context where I know your heart and you know mine. In other words, we live intimacy, we don't do intimacy. Intimacy doesn't mean you sit down and go, okay, will you share your feelings about the day because the children are all quiet and bathed and giving us plenty of room to... You're not going to have that so much. Some of the deepest intimacy I've ever had with my wife was across a gurney in an ER when one of our children was getting their broken leg set. And your eyes meet hers and her eyes meet yours. And if you're awake emotionally like I was in the jet story, then you see the fear in her eyes and she sees the fear in your eyes, and y'all are connected. In other words, intimacy is not just holding hands at a two-top. The intimacy I'm talking about is a way we live in which I let your heart into mine, okay? And so you'll encounter situations in your life. Maybe you're tapped out, you're too tired, you got nothing, you're the bottom of the U. Share that. You want to hear what intimacy can sound like? How are you? I am so tapped out, I got nothing. Like, I know maybe you want to really connect. My heart is just kind of like exhausted. That was a very intimate thing to say, okay? In other words, intimacy is your heart shared even in the moment, even if it's, hey, we're both too tired, you want to just watch a Netflix together, but at least I'm not disconnecting from you, okay? So, answer number 2 to the trench people, broaden your definition of intimacy. We don't just do intimacy, we live it, okay? Which reminds me that we're pushing on abiding in intimacy because it's our topic, but legitimacy, abiding in TCB are both still important. I don't want to lose that, okay? Admittedly, we have to do TCB in order to function. You know those couples, y'all know those couples who are both abiders, and they just live in abiding oneness and goo-goo-eyed intimacy all the time, and they have, a family tree house and make Chinese paper lanterns and, but they end up nobody's paying the bills, and they got 10 kids in dirty diapers and 2 rusty Subarus in the garage, and nobody's running this love fest. So practical life is important, which, by the way, is why a lot of us abiders married you TCBers in the first place. I mean, we're all emotionally and, whatever, and you feel kind of grounded to us, and you actually solve problems, and you actually give structure, and that makes life happen, and that felt really secure and good when we married you. And then later on, we resent you for it, like, oh my gosh, you're so non-emotional, right? Well, that's why I married you, okay? Because if I ran the house, it'd be just, blah, all right? The goal, by the way, is to be integrated. Image of God, like Christ. That's my one thing that, people are always, are you into the Enneagram? Are you into blah, blah, blah? I'm like, yeah, that's fine. But my resistance to the personality profiles is that people go, well, I'm just an 8. Oh, well, close in prayer. Sounds like you're done. Okay? Think of it like this. You are a circle that's not a complete circle. You're bulging out here. Maybe you're too emotional. Maybe you're too anal and rigid. Maybe you are too scared of other people. Whatever your Enneagram is. I want you to look at that as, how do I grow in my body of Christ people, whatever, to make the circle more cylindrical, circular. I don't know. In other words, there's growth for both. TCBers, I'm pushing you to be growing and stretching on what it would look to be more emotionally engaged. I told you I'm a real emotional person. And a lot of my work was in becoming less emotional, learn to manage my emotion. We'll get to that in just a minute. But anyway, the goal is integration. The goal is not just, be more this or that. And those of you who are into the personality profiles, remember that. Great. I'm glad you're an 8. Stretch more to become more like a 2 as well. All right. There's your growth edge. You got it defined. All right. Now, part 2 of this. We've been talking essentially all morning about let you in. Can I let you in? But remember the other side of this? Can I keep you in? As we said last night, all of the abiders are going, ooh, loving this intimacy talk. And yet the question we need to be asking, remember, is what do we do with intimacy when we get it? Am I able to hold on to their love? Am I able to trust it? Like, if my spouse doesn't, quote, engage my feelings, that they don't care about me. Am I able to push back on that kind of thing? All right? Or if we're not talking as much as I wish, then, I'm lonely in our marriage. Okay? So our question is, can I stay grounded and feel loved and feel good even if we aren't connecting right now? Okay? Like I said, what you expect to hear from a marriage conference is y'all need to go share your feelings more. And that is exactly one half of the truth. Okay, the other half of the truth here is that the deficits and limitations of those of us who are emotionally oriented, the struggle we have with knowing you love me even if you're too busy to pay attention to me right now, is as big a problem as the spouse who doesn't know how to be close. They are exactly as significant as one another, okay? So can we catch? Can we stay grounded? Can we hold on to it? Okay? That marriage guy used to say, a woman needs 5 meaningful touches a day in order to feel loved. I'm like, okay, but what'd she do with the first 4? I'm just asking, I don't know. What do we do with love when we get it? Okay? We abiders need to take responsibility for that. And here we go into our next portion. Otherwise, our spouses are going to experience our longing, or our hunger, or our urgency, or that anxiety that we're not close as I wish we were, as some sort of a need that they're supposed to meet or else. And what will happen is we will start a dance. And let's talk about dances for a little bit, because this is key. If you want to understand marriage and you want to understand dating, this is what I do in premarital work as well as marital work. Though I prefer pre-engagement. Any of you who are singles, if you want to do premarital work, do pre-engagement work. Because once you get engaged, the mothers are involved. Okay, basically, it's too late, baby. It's like, who are we kidding here? Anyway, I love to do pre-engagement because I want to help you learn what your dance is, because it's going to be the same dance you're going to dance to the old folks' home. All right? There was a Mississippiism. That one. That's right. So what do I mean by dance? Here's the secret. If you want to understand marriage problems are not cause and effect. A causes B. Whose fault is it? Marriage problems are more like that water cycle you learned about in 6th grade science. Water evaporates and it condensates and it precipitates. You do that for a science project, right? So basically, in a marriage, I do A, which makes you do B, which makes me do A more, which makes you do B more, all right? On and on. You got to understand that. And one of the things we're going to talk about for the rest of this morning is how your dances play into your marriage. If you can go bird's eye enough to see your dances, you're gold, man, okay? So let me give you a couple examples of dances. I had a couple a while back, and he's kind of controlling, wants his way, pretty loud, kind of a hard time letting her be her. Remember that one? Now, she doesn't like that, and she wants to exist, and she wants to have her opinions. And so she's kind of tired of him pushing her around and telling her she's wrong. So she shares her opinions, but she shares them with a little spunk, a little spark, admittedly kind of feisty. Now, he hears that as like, gosh, she's being feisty. And so he feels kind of triggered and kind of threatened because this woman is basically telling him he's wrong again. And so that makes him mad. And so what does he do? He kind of controls her worse. Why do you have to always act like that? Which she hears as what? Oh my gosh, I can't even voice an opinion without him getting reactive. So what does she do? She gets more feisty. And he's like, whoa, now you're really feisty. And so he gets more, and they go on and on and on. That's a dance, okay? I do A makes you do B. You see the cycle? Okay? So let's talk about a couple of good dances with intimacy, okay? Kind of like dances with wolves, only without the Indians. Anyway, okay, so let's say you have a real abider married to a real TCBer, okay, which, like I say, these are on a continuum, but we tend toward one end or the other, and oftentimes you'll have an abider and a TCBer, me and Norm are. And the abider has all these feelings, and they want to share the feelings. I'm afraid of this, I'm mad at that. Oh, thanks. This seems kind of weatherproof. Do we need to wipe up that bit of water? Anybody care? All right. Send me a towel if you want. A biter has all these feelings. I'm sad about this. I'm angry about that. I'm mad about this. I'm wishing this and that. All these level 4 feelings. So in response to that, what does TCB Elvis say or Elvira say? They say, well, why don't you take up jogging? All right. Or they're like, will you let me talk to her? I'll tell her where she can put her carpool. In other words, who cares about all these feelings? This doesn't solve the problem. That doesn't change anything. All these feelings you're sharing. Now, let me ask you, why do they do that? Why do they say that? Why do they act that way? Because they're jerks? Because they don't care about you? No, it's because that's what level 3 is about, solving problems, okay? In other words, that's their natural habitat. You say, here's a problem, I'm sad about this. They're like, well, let's do something so you don't have to be sad anymore. This isn't like long division, okay? That's just kind of their orientation. If you're communicating something that's about emotional content to somebody who is a problem solver, they're going to sort of no habla. They're going to not speak the language. Thank you so much. Again, remember blame marriage from last night? Do you hear that I'm talking about blame marriage again? In other words, it's not that they're bad people. It's that y'all are getting off on different floors. All right? And I want you to have a category for that. I want you to, instead of going home going, you don't understand me, I want you to be able to go home and say, oh my gosh, you're kind of more of a TCBer and I'm more of an abider. It's why we do this dance, you know? Nobody's the bad guy, okay? The little patterns and the stuff is our bad guy, okay? Anyway, all that problem solving and whatever doesn't feel too good to a biter. Remember our dance? We're going back to our dance. They bring feelings. Problem solver tries to fix them. That doesn't feel too good with them. Doesn't feel emotionally intimate. So they're not very happy. So what do? What does the abider do now? And we go on with the dance. They start demanding closeness from Elvis and criticizing him for being such a distant flatliner. Like, all you want is sex. Or instead of getting married, you should have stayed in the frat house. And living with you is like living with an android. And it's like all that, of course, woos him to her, of course. In other words, problem-solving Elvis hears this like you just did is super critical, okay? To their ears, you're saying the worst thing you could say to a practical problem solver. They failed, all right? Basically, number one thing I hear from TCBers in my office is, I just want her to be happy. That's why they fix. They have an emotional need to fix because they can't sit with the tension emotionally of seeing you struggle. They want to make you feel better. And they don't realize that trying to fix it makes you feel worse. All right, so TCB Elvis hears this criticism, or Elvira, she hears this criticism, and what do? The last thing the abider would ever want. They withdraw. They're gone. They get the heck out of Dodge. They're on Neptune emotionally, right? So a biter really freaks out. He's on Timbuk. He's out in G sector somewhere. No way we're close now. And you see how the dance just escalates and escalates, all right? This is what we call the approacher-avoider dance, one of the super common ones. saw a couple a while back, and he was a real kind of insecure guy. And he was always needing affirmation from his wife. Like, are you happy with me? Kind of that kind of thing. And she, of course, you can guess what she was like. She was one of those people who has like a no crybabies bumper sticker, grow up and handle it, big boy kind of. And he was always, he'd be like, I love you. Which she would hear like you just heard it, not as a man declaring his love. It was more like, will you give me like some goodies and some reassurance? And she would kind of go, love you too, which totally didn't scratch his itch, and they would be off the races. You can feel how the dance unfolds, all right? He would get needy and she'd feel suffocated, and there we go. So, of course, there is growth to do in terms of like how they manage real intimacy. But the question I had for him, since this is kind of a keep you in topic right now, is what does he do with that feeling of insecurity? What does he do with keep you in? In other words, if we reference back our talk from last night, what blind spot was he missing? The ability to keep her in. Could he live with a sense of like, well, she's not affirming me right now, but I know she loves me. Can I stay grounded in that? He had to grow there. And once he did, she felt the pressure lift. She had more freedom. You can't love and affirm anybody if you have to. So all of a sudden, she was free now to actually start to give love rather than being forced to do it out of his neediness. Does that make sense? All right. What intimacy is, some levels of it, some problems with it, some dances with it. Let's talk some about how we grow here, and then we'll take a break and come back and do conflict. Let's start with TCBers, guys and ladies. Let's start with y'all. What do you need to learn? Number one, see the relational world, the emotional world is valid. I hope I'm making that kind of clear here this morning. If you don't understand it, get relational people, body of Christ people to help you learn, because it's such a huge, gigantic part of our hearts and our lives, okay? A lot of guys and a lot of our culture, one of the reasons I really want to be explaining to you what intimacy really is and what it sounds like and feels like, because a lot of like guys, especially in our culture, feel like if I'm going to be like emotionally connected, it means I have to like open up on the golf course or something like, hey guys, just need y'all to know I got this ache and void within me, or hey, you guys ever just feel like crying for no reason? No, that's not what it means, all right? Intimacy just means to have a relationship in which I'm not alone, all right? So there's a lot of talk about, men are into like goal attainment and problem solving, and women are into relational stuff, Venus and Mars kind of stuff. And there's some validity to that, but don't buy the whole enchilada on that, okay? I mean, think about how did all this marriage stuff begin? The marriage stuff didn't begin by God coming to Adam and going, look, Adam, I know you're fine with like, your mountain bike and your ESPN and all that, but I've decided to make a woman, and well, she's going to need a lot, okay? You're going to have to learn communication skills, and you're going to have to share your feelings, but do this for me, Adam. We've been through a lot. That's not how it started. That's not what God said. God comes to Adam and he said, I see that you are in a place of deep need. Let me give you someone you desperately need. I mean, isn't it interesting that this gets into a whole other topic, which I will resist, but isn't it interesting that there was not a helper found suitable for him? Now, in our culture, what does that mean? Ladies, you want to be a helper? In our culture, a helper's like, I'm Batman and you're Lois Lane. Who wants to be that, I'm Scoob and I'm Shaggy and you're Scoob. It's like nobody wants Skipper and Gilligan. Helpers are not cool. But the only other person that Hebrew word is used for in the Bible is Yahweh in his relationship with his people. Our refuge and our strength, a very present help in time of trouble. In other words, God's saying to Adam, let me give to you someone who will embody for you the kind of role that I have with my people Israel, which means she'll be bringing you stuff you don't want to hear sometimes. She'll be bringing you things that will bring you life. You need a helper suitable for you, okay? So, to the degree that any of us, man or woman, are not seeing that relational world as valid, see that as a problem, all right? If we feel that way, we're out of step some way with what God created the world to be. Paul tells us that the whole creation is groaning for that kind of restoration, and if we're not, then check your ticket stub, make sure you got off at the right planet, because, the rest of us are groaning, right? And you might need other people to call these parts out of you. Remember the body of Christ people? I want people in my life, if I'm not engaged emotionally, I want to talk to them about that. And what they'll do is, if they're smart and they're loving, they'll call you out. They'll say, dude, you're just telling us a story. Yeah, okay, your kid is sick. Your kid's in the hospital. Great, we got the facts. St. D, 7th floor. But where's your heart? Is this scaring you? How can we give to you? We need people to kind of pull that out of us. If you don't understand this world, if your spouse is saying you don't get it, listen to them, okay? They're pointing out a blind spot for you. Secondly, learn what it means to be with. I alluded to this last night, God's favorite preposition, remember? This is so important. I mean, think about it. What do TCBers think they need to do if their spouse, a biter spouse, comes and brings, these feelings? I'm hurting, I'm sad, I'm mad, whatever like that. They're problem solvers, right? So what do they feel like they need to do? Fix it in some way, right? Which is terrible. That'd be overwhelming to anyone. Being married to this person who's always emoting and bringing problems, and I have to fix it, and I'm on call 24/7, gack. Which ultimately means they get overwhelmed, they give up, they pull away, and we start a dance, right? Well, here's some good news. You don't have to fix it, all right? Let me give you a little model for making sense of hearing your spouse. For actually, how do we engage and make sense of pain in the lives of anybody? This can be your kids. Actually, this model's in the parenting book too for kids. But anybody. I call it blow off, with, or fix. So blow off is you're struggling. I'm like, get over it, whatever. Your kid's like, I don't like this. You go, well, think about the starving kids in Africa, okay? Fix is somebody has a problem. We're like, well, let's have a party. Or, look at the bright side. Or your kid doesn't like their food. You go, well, then we'll make you chicken nuggets, honey. Okay? With doesn't fix. With doesn't blow off. With says, I get it. I love you. I care. I can't fix it. That's why you need me. That's why you need my love. Because some things aren't fixable. I'm with you. So somebody experiences a death. Blow off says, oh, well, all things work together for good. I'm going to Bible verse you. I don't want to get close to your heart. Fix is like, hey, look, after the funeral, let's go down to New Orleans and tie one on and just like, hey, it's going to be all right. With says this. You know why you don't know what to say at a funeral? Because there's nothing to say at a funeral. Man, I don't even know what to say. We love y'all. I can't even imagine what you're going through. I'll walk through it with you. We'll walk through this together. I want to know what you're going through. In other words, I'm with you. I'm going to walk at your side. I'm not fixing it. I'm not trying to make it better. You can just get my heart alongside, okay? So your spouse comes to you with this big disappointment, something they're hurting about. Don't take it on. Don't try to fix it. Say, baby, no way. Oh my gosh. You did all that work and somebody else got credit for it? What can I give you? I'm so with you in that. I so care about that. All right? And you know what they're probably going to say? They're going to say, nothing. I don't need nothing from you. I just wanted you to know. I just wanted you with me in it. Okay? Why? Because that's the most healing thing there is. Why? Because remember last night I told you, for some reason I don't understand. If pain is brought into a relationship with another person, for some reason it gets better. That's one of the reasons therapy works. So we're just applying that to your marriage. If you can just be with in a loving way, it heals them, okay? And now, now you are fixing it, but you're fixing the right thing. You can fix it, but emotions get fixed by being connected to. So I had this guy ask me once at a conference. I did a conference, and he comes after me. He goes, "Yeah, but like, what if her feelings are wrong?" He said, she says everybody in the church hates her, and they don't hate her. What am I supposed to do with that? And I'm like, good question, right? Our wounded pathological feelings are often incorrect, right? But in order to get permission to actually try to correct them, we need to be heard first. Another John Cox principle: emotions only heal if they are heard first, understood first. Am I off again? I jinxed us, Brandon, when I said, did I unplug it? I told him yesterday, I said, the key to a conference going smooth is like for the tech to not mess up. And I actually said that out loud in the universe, and I've learned my lesson. That's like saying, I hadn't gotten the flu in several years, It says I'm on. Anyway, I'll keep talking. Anyway, you can swing back with new information later. I'm hearing you. Nobody in the church likes you. I get it. I love you. After they felt understood, you can swing back and say, hey, I do know some things that might mitigate against what you're feeling if you want to hear them on their terms. But fixers, it's not your job to go in and fix it, okay? The only exception to this empathy thing of hearing people is people who are chronic whiners and complainers. In other words, I have some clients who basically just want to tell me every session all their life about, you're not going to believe what this person did to me, and you're not going to believe what that person did to me, and all they want to do is kind of do he language and she language about the universe. And, people say that we are, a paid listening ear, but I'm not. I'm not going to waste my time doing that. If somebody is in pain, cool. If they want to get creative about what it looks like to grow and move out of it, cool. If they just want to pay somebody to listen to them talk about being in a victim position, I will usually hear that for a few sessions, and then I'll say something like, yeah, you really have been hurting so much for so long about this. What is it you think you need in order to kind of get powerful enough to push out of this position of being so defined by the way this person treated you? Let's get creative on that. And I'm going to, in a kind way, say, let's put on your big boy panties and like do something about this, okay? So, again, you hear the balance. We're going back and forth between with and love and really problem solving, all right? Now, abiders, what do we need to hear? Number one, learn to ask for closeness when you want it. Don't criticize, demand, be disappointed for closeness. I had a client in my office years back, and she was eating supper. She and her husband were eating supper, and he got on his phone. He was playing on his phone during supper. And so naturally, she said, could you just put down your phone for 5 seconds and talk to me? Makes me want to cuddle. How about you, huh? Right? In other words, those of us emotional connectors, to the degree that our longing for connection feels like a disappointed dance, a disappointed demand to our TCB spouse, cue the dance, baby. They're going to hear it as a criticism. They're going to pop smoke, and there's going to be less closeness. They're gone, Neptune again, all right? Because we've disappointed them again. What I want you to do is ask them. Real sophisticated stuff. I want you to say, you know what? I would really love to be closer to you tonight. Would you be willing to, when you're done on your phone, for us to talk? I want you to ask. I love the term, would you be willing, by the way. Would you be willing to do this? Sort of begins by saying, this is not going to be a demand. This is not a, why don't you ever? This is a, would you be willing to do this? I also like when your spouse hurts you or does something yucky, instead of complaining about what they did, ask for something new in the future. Instead of going, oh my gosh, I can't believe that you just stood there at that party while that person said that to me. I would rather you say, hey, in the future, it would really feel good to me if somebody disses me at a party if you were kind of an advocate for me. Would you do that for me in the future? And they're going to so much more be able to hear that because you're not beating them up about the past. You're literally taking some responsibility and asking for something about the future. All right? Now, when you get that demand vibe out, that disappointed vibe out, it's going to triple your chances of getting that kind of connection you long for, okay? By the way, relevant to this issue of wanting to be heard, one of the things that us relators need to recognize is that it's a big ask to ask somebody to sit and listen to our feelings. We think it's like, well, this is what a relationship should be. It's a big ask, okay? Chris Rock said, okay, told you. He said, when your woman says, I wish we talked more, what she means is, I wished I talked more, and you sat there and listened to me, okay? In other words, when we abiders want to, talk and share, this is a big ask. It's costly to sit and listen. I almost remember that for our spouses. I mean, I am emotionally connected, but I am a dude, all right? And I lived in a house with a wife and 3 girls. I lived with 4 women, and all they wanted to do was talk, okay? It drove me crazy. I always wanted to, one of those line judges in tennis who was like, quiet, please. And everybody gets quiet. It's like, I love that. I want that guy. We need him in the den, Quiet, please. Works immediately. Okay. All right. Another point for us for us connector people is share your feelings, but remember your feelings are your responsibility, not your spouse's. This is huge for us connectors, okay? Here's how we often sound. I feel lonely in our marriage. Trojan virus implication there is, and it's because of you, and what are you going to do about it, okay? And they're going to trigger, dance, pull away, exactly what we don't want, okay? Responsibility says, I'm feeling lonely a lot lately. I'm not sure exactly why. I mean, it might have something to do with us. It might be me. But I wanted to let you know so we could get creative and curious about it and talk about it. I'm talking to my body of Christ people about it. But I wanted you to know and be with me. Okay? Do you hear the responsibility there? I'm still lonely, but I'm not just dumping it on you. I'm actually getting curious myself and taking some responsibility for it myself. So few connector abiders do that. We just start like scattershotting our feelings around and wondering why you don't want to hear me better. Okay? This is the 4th eye. Remember from last night? That ability to have a feeling and share it. So, your feelings are great, but they're still your responsibility. Another secret of the universe there. The goal of intimacy is for you to share your heart and be known. Not for your spouse to make you feel better. It's still your responsibility. Okay? So share, but remember, you could be lonely for 100 reasons, maybe one of which has something to do with your spouse, okay? We talk about that in Marriage 2.0, by the way, if you want to get on the podcast. So another way of saying this is sharing your feelings is not the same as doing your feelings, okay? So she starts sobbing because she's worried about your marriage, all right? And freaking out in anxiety. I'm just sharing my feelings. No, you're not. You're doing your feelings, okay? Saying, I'm scared about your job, and can we talk about it? It's real different from saying, oh my gosh, we're going to end up living in a trailer. All right? I'm just sharing my feelings. No, you're not. You're carpet bombing Cambodia with your feelings, okay? And that's going to just set your TCB spouse off, cue the dance, they're gone. Why don't you ever listen to me? Because you just unloaded all these feelings, all right? They're your responsibility. All right, lastly, have other resources in your life. We alluded to this last night, and it's fundamental for all of our blind spots, but I want to apply it to us relator connectors. I know so many of you long for more closeness and connection in your marriages. You understand what real emotional connection looks like, and you long for it, and you can feel it missing. And that feels lonely and scary. And few things hurt as much as a marriage where you feel lonely. And you singles, are like, oh, I want someone in my life. I hope one of the things we made clear this morning is that is very important, that kind of connection. But there's more to the story than that. As I alluded to last night, I know this is a cultural no-no, but I want to say it anyway. I don't think marriage was ever intended to be the sole resource for all of our intimacy needs, okay? Except that one. I think God created us to have deep sharing with our spouses. But if you think about it, like we said last night, the New Testament talks a lot more about connection within the body, oneness in the body, than it does in marriage. And our culture, even our Christian culture, has turned marriage into the fount of getting all of our needs met, and you and her time and a little special time, and y'all need to get away and have a little couple, whatever. And that's cultural, okay? God doesn't say that. He says in the body, love one another. In the body, go to one another, bear with one another, confess to one another, confront one another, be one in the body, okay? And since our culture's lost that growing, nurturing community thing that we talked about, we've had to create things like therapy and small groups, which is great. But then we've turned marriage into this little special secret place in which we're going to get all of our needs met, me from you, you from me, and it's no wonder we're disappointed. And it's no wonder singles are freaking out, going, oh my gosh, what if I never get married? I'll miss out on the fount of wonder. So we need these truth-telling people in our life outside of our marriage feeding in. Make that stagnant pond a brook to where you've got new stuff coming in. People who are wise and safe, and they're in the background, and I'm bringing stuff to them, not just to my spouse. Otherwise, we end up with most marriages in which I'm trying to get all of my emotional needs met by you. Why don't you hear me? And you're trying to get all your emotional needs met by me. Why don't you give me more space and freedom? And we end up with a situation that I call 2 ticks and no dog. I'm trying to get all my needs met by you, and you're trying to get them met by me. So you want better marriages, like I said last night, let's be developing these kind of relationships. And what happens, abiders, is if we have those kind of relationships outside of our marriages, we then get filled up, lots of goodies, and we then come back to our marriages kind of filled up. We don't have that urgency. We don't have that intensity. All right? And so guess what? The dance doesn't happen. All right. So that's intimacy.